With half of marriages ending in divorce, you would think checking out the viability of a relationship before getting married would be a really good idea. In fact, many, if not most, clergy require some form of premarital counseling before they'll conduct the ceremony. How awful is it? And how different is it from seeing a secular marriage counselor to check things out? I'm Dick Goldberg, and welcome to Insights. With us to discuss this are the Reverend Michael Schuler. He has been a Unitarian Universalist minister for 35 years and has served 3 congregations. The past 26 years, he has served as the senior minister at the First Unitarian Society of Madison, Wisconsin, which is one of the largest such societies in America. Among many notable honors and titles, he is the author of Making the Good Life Last: 4 Keys to Sustainable Living. Also with us is the Reverend Eldonna Hazen. She's the senior minister at the First Congregational Church of Christ in Madison, Wisconsin. She had a passion for the ministry by the time she was in college, but at that time it didn't feel like her being a lesbian would allow her to be a good fit for her church. Later in her life, when that fit with the church, and it did work, she pursued her true passion. She has served for 9 years at her church and has just recently been called by the church to be their senior minister. Thanks, both of you, for being with us.
Thank you.
If you are performing a wedding ceremony, do you require premarital counseling?
Yes, I do. I require 3 sessions. I'm always a little iffy on calling it counseling because I'm not sure that I'm really counseling them to do anything. But I do require 3 sessions, which I hope takes them to a deeper level in their conversations between the 2 of them.
You too, Michael?
I don't absolutely require it. I strongly suggest it. I do have some couples whom I'm impressed with their maturity or who may be receiving counseling from someone other than myself. But I would say that having extended the offer, that 90 to 95% of the couples I work with accept it and take me up on it.
But you demanded, Eldonna.
I do, and I would say there is one caveat to that, and that's if it was a family situation or a friend that I don't take them. I suggest they go elsewhere for that, and I can do the ceremony piece.
By family situation, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, if I'm related to them, or
sure.
if I'm a part of that family, right, certainly. It's really better for them to go somewhere else.
Having done two weddings for members of my family in the last 3 years, I would agree with that. I concur. One of the differences maybe here is that as a Unitarian Universalist, like many of my colleagues, I perform weddings for people that did not belong to my faith tradition. Mm-hmm. And over the course of my career, I performed 700 weddings plus. And on some occasions, those people are coming to me from a distance. In other words, they do not live in the Madison area. This is their home. They want to get married here. But distance being prohibitive, I can't always do the counseling that I want because they're just kind of in and out of my office, and we do the best we can.
Yeah. Now, how different is this from just seeing a marriage counselor, a psychotherapist saying, we just want to check things out. We want to kick the tires before we get married?
Well, not having gone through that kind of counseling personally, I would say what I do in it is also weave the ceremony piece into the time that I spend with them. So not only are we talking about their relationship, but the stress levels that come along with that wedding and how we respond to that, how the 2 of them respond to each other or family. Beyond that. So I think once you weave the ceremony piece in there, it makes it a lot different than when you're just talking between 2 people.
You know, clearly, if couples have problems, they could benefit from this. If they have issues that are important and difficult. But what about the blissful couples who are getting married? Why do they need it? Why is it helpful?
Well, my approach, I use an instrument called Prepare. And actually, the folks that develop Prepare have a number of different instruments that can be applied not only for couples prior to getting married, but also for couples to take the temperature of the relationship intermittently over a period of years. And the thing that I like about Prepare, I tell couples that this just provides me with a snapshot of their relationship. It's not a compatibility test. It's not going to determine whether or not I perform their wedding or whether they're dysfunctional or they're healthy. but it does systematically go through 11 different areas of relational life. And it does, I think, create a more complete picture of the relationship and the ways in which their values either diverge or are connected with each other, as we go through our conversations. I use these as a conversation starter, and then we have several sessions where we walk through the inventory and then kind of check out whether the findings that are given to me on that inventory actually match what the couple are thinking about each other as we talk about it together.
And do you follow a similar?
Yes, I usually prepare also for part of the sessions. I also do a family mapping piece where each one of them maps out their family back to their grandparents and try to highlight either events or personalities that have influenced who they are. So we talk about their legacy and how they became who they are by
not like looking back to see if Grandpa was depressed and Grandma was the alcoholic and stuff like that.
Well, sometimes those things come out in that, but there are definitely, we are shaped by how we were raised and who raised us. And so that's a piece. In addition to, I say exactly what Michael's saying about the prepare. It's a great way to enter. It's a great way to enter.
I want to know all 11, but before we get to that, how often do you see a red light? What percentage of times you're talking to people and that red light in your head goes off saying, I don't know, we might have a problem here?
Probably only about 10% of the time.
That's a lot,
frankly.
Michael. 10% is still a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it
You've
could
done
be,
that
but when I say the red light or the red flag, what I'm looking for is something that bears further investigation, and perhaps might require a reference or a recommendation for them to see somebody else who's equipped to deal with that specific issue. And part of that has to do with the fact that I'm not a professional psychotherapist, nor do I have the time in my schedule to be able to do in-depth counseling with any particular couple. So I can make recommendations for further work on an issue, but even then, that's relatively rare. Most of the time, by the time, after we've talked through the issue at hand, we've got a pretty good understanding of where the problems lie, what kind of work they need to do moving forward, and normally I can elicit a commitment from them, to actually work on this. And by the way, the Prepare inventory also comes with a workbook that I provide to the couple that has a number of exercises in it that they can use in terms of kind of coming to terms with the issues that we've discovered.
Wow. Similar experience, he's saying 10%.
I think that's probably fairly accurate. I would have said on the low end. Yeah. I realize that's still high. But what I have found more than anything is that the couple themselves are the ones that recognize, wow, this was an uncomfortable conversation for us to have, and so it's not necessarily, I'm not always the one that has to say, I think you two could benefit from talking to someone else. And I have had situations where the couples themselves have said, I don't think we're ready after we've gone through a piece of that.
Wow.
Right.
Will you tell us, I don't know if you can, for confidentiality, tell us about a case, but how might that happen?
Well, it was as we started having conversations, and they realized that they thought they were holding this distance relationship together really well.
Long distance?
Long distance. and that one had come to a commitment, believed that they had been committed in the relationship for 7 years, and it was time to move forward in the marriage. And the more we talked about it, the commitment for the other one kind of caused big eyes to happen. And what am I getting myself into? And they backed off and said that we're not ready. And then it was about, I think it was maybe 4 years later, I got a call from them, and they were no longer in the area, but wondered if I would then do their ceremony. They felt like they had done the work that was needed and had come back together, which is great from my standpoint, that they decided, let's step back, let's look at this, it's hard work. It is hard work.
Marriage.
Yes. Yes.
Darn.
Even getting to that point is hard work. And I would concur with Eldonna's comment, because the couple of times in which I've had couples who have decided on the basis of our conversations not to proceed, there are couples that have been together for actually a considerable amount of time.
Oh.
And I will say that 95% of the couples that I work with are cohabitating, when they're planning to get married. Absolutely. And in the two instances that I can think of, one was actually a gay couple and one was a heterosexual couple. In both instances, one party to the relationship basically said, fish or cut bait. We're either going to terminate this relationship or we're going to make a formal commitment to each other. And the other party simply wasn't ready to do that.
Why were they talking to you? I would think they were there because they were going to get married, right?
Well, because initially, the other party said, "Oh, all right, okay, we'll go ahead with this." But then once we got into the nitty-gritty of it, then it was clear that one party was far less eager, to make that move than the other one. And so it kind of exposed the fact that this was, well, for lack of a better term, kind of a shotgun type of arrangement. Yeah.
Were they both in love?
I think initially they were.
Well, when they saw you, at the time they sat down with you, do you think they were both in love?
That's hard to say. That's hard to say.
Because I'm wondering about love. And is love, if they really are in love, I don't even know what that means. Maybe you could tell me. But if they are they okay?
Well, one of the things that I oftentimes query a couple about, there's one section of Prepare called Marriage Expectations, which asks a number of questions around the kind of the emotional tenor and tone of the relationship. People's expectations of what it's going to feel like moving forward. Is there going to continue to be a significant amount of romance involved with the relationship? Is there anything that the partner could do that might cause the other person to fall out of love with them? And what I'll oftentimes hear couples saying when they have to identify their bottom line, this is what I could not tolerate in a relationship, is they will oftentimes say, I will never stop loving this person, but there may be a time when I could never live with them.
What would that be? What have you heard?
Well, infidelity is the most common remark that people will make. But if a person inexplicably became abusive, if a person developed a serious addiction of some kind, a gambling addiction, and it was wasting the family's resources, those are the kind of things that people will allude to.
Is that a standard question in this process to ask, what could you not tolerate?
Well, this actually comes out of the assessment that they do online, and then we get the results of that in a quite large multi-page
Is there anything you
document.
can add to that for what you've seen? He's saying...
well, I think one of the great pieces about that particular marriage expectations is that sets the tone for a lot of other things. So one of the assessment pieces in this inventory is that it tries to identify, is this person looking through rose-colored glasses, or do they have a real understanding of the commitment that they're making? And so that shows up in the assessment tool that we receive then, that this person is probably not seeing marriage clearly, or this person really has a good handle and maybe this one doesn't. So when we're looking at that feedback, we can try to pursue that gap a little bit if there's a gap there.
I assume that's people who are getting married for the first time. Is that a safe assumption that aren't realistic? People second time around are?
There's one kind of overall measure that they take and prepare called idealistic distortion. Again, the tendency of people to idealize the relationship and to be less aware of potential problems than they need to be. And I've done a lot of weddings for people who have already been married and have experienced a divorce, or oftentimes older people who have never been married before but that have had committed relationships that have fallen apart. And yes, those people tend to be more realistic. The younger the couples, generally the more idealistic, the more rose-colored the glasses are that they're wearing.
Is it also related to how long they've been in the relationship? Like been dating 4 months and we're ready versus 5 years?
I think so. I think that would generally be true.
Yeah.
And I think there is some, as Michael was talking about the cohabitating, I think that there is a difference when you're not spending 24 hours a day with someone, or when you see that somebody doesn't put the lid on their toothpaste every day. I mean, those things start to come to the surface, and this is bugging me. And so you see a lot more of that. I think clarity that people have in the relationship when they are cohabitating.
Can you be in the same kind of in love if you know all this? And let's say they're pretty wise about being realistic. Is the a bud off the bloom, or whatever that expression is, by that time, and they're not quite as excited because they know the truth?
Well, I don't think that they're in a kind of a state of euphoria like they might be in the first 6-month honeymoon, of their relationship. But what happens, I think, is that couples, the longer they're together, they tend to move from that more classically romantic kind of love, where there's more kind of bells ringing in the relationship. This is the only person for me. To what one therapist that I admire has said, they're into the stirring the oatmeal phase, where just doing those kind of pedestrian, everyday things together, is a reward in itself. And they don't look for a lot of excitement, but they definitely have gotten to the point where they're just very comfortable with each other. And they're used to each other's quirks and foibles, and just the opportunity to share in more commonplace type of activities.
I would think the more challenging couple for you then would be the couple that is in that phase. They're young, they haven't spent a long time together. That typically would present more red flags than the long-term couple.
Well, I think it is a little bit dependent on what they have gone through together. Because some people can be together for 6 months, a very short amount of time, but have had to balance a lot of things in their relationship, or have maybe met with tragedy of some kind within a family that has exposed a lot more to one another than the people who have been together for a year and, oh gosh, everything's great, and they haven't faced any challenges together. So I think that piece also plays into how much have you experienced together. If it's all been going out for dinner and a movie,
yes,
that's
right, it hasn't been tested.
Right.
You haven't seen the real humanness of the person you're with. These 11 areas, are they things you can rattle off in a couple words each, or do they require a long explanation for each area?
No, I think they're fairly self-evident. We basically talked about marital expectations. There's communication, there's conflict resolution, there's personality issues, there's financial affairs, there's intimacy and sexuality, there's parenting, there's spiritual beliefs, something called role relationship, which has to do, that's the one that usually confuses couples the most. It basically asks whether they feel like the relationship fits more into a kind of a traditional pattern with very clearly defined male and female roles in the relationship, or whether it's more flexible. And what am I forgetting?
I don't know. I got off onto your role, because that's always an interesting one for me.
Oh, there's family and friends too, and oftentimes, as Eldonna mentioned, that's where you can kind of get into some of that family history. And if there are some reservations on the part of some family members, oftentimes in my case, coming to a Unitarian minister, those have to do with religion and some disappointment on the part of parents or grandparents that they're getting married in a non-traditional church.
Yeah. Boy, I don't know where to begin. All of that is so interesting. The role relationships. Do you get a lot of discordance with couples in this area?
I do not.
No.
I don't for the most part.
But
it's actually fascinating to watch. You can almost, in the conversation, you almost don't have to look at at what the worksheet that comes back for us says, just by listening to their conversation. So if I do all of the, whether it's male, female, or whether it's a same-sex relationship, if I do all of the house cleaning and you do all of the outside work, it lends itself to a traditional role relationship. Or if I'm willing, I really like mowing the lawn, and so what I'm supposed to do is inside, but it's outside work, you can almost hear that coming through, so well, this is more of an egalitarian relationship. But it's fascinating to watch, because there are times when very young people still are in the traditional roles.
Which is interesting, because there is one question that essentially says, we're flexible in our lifestyle and we do not assign jobs based on gender expectations. And yet, and then the next question, it'll ask, do you expect to be doing more than your share of the household tasks? And most of the women that I talk to, despite the fact that their heads are in the same place, their actions don't mirror that, and women oftentimes feel very, very much like they're going to be carrying the brunt of, of the household responsibilities once they get married.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. So,
isn't that true?
Well, yes, it is, and particularly as I emphasize with couples, particularly true once a child enters the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do they both say okay, or does the woman say, "Wait a minute"?
Oftentimes, I find that this is something that couples find kind of amusing about the disconnect, and usually, and again, it's usually women who feel that they're a little more put upon. Men kind of do more of the fun things, Women get stuck more with the drudgery, cleaning the bathrooms and washing the dishes, and the men will oftentimes fess up that, yeah, I know I need to do better than this. I know I need to do better, and so it just makes them conscious of the need to continue working on that.
Why don't they do better?
I think it has to do with cultural assumptions, cultural overlays, and it's just a default position to slide into those traditional roles.
I would add something to that from my own experience. Sure. I think I can't. Like, I try and I goof up, and then I have to ask for advice. Well, where does this go? Where does that go? And I really try. And I have a feeling, I've seen the same experience with other people I know in couples where the men try, but they fumble. And then they don't want to be criticized because the women have more quote-unquote training from their whole upbringing as women. And so that's a tricky issue, I think.
It may be, and perhaps I'm a little unrealistic because I was raised in a family that owned a hospitality business,
yes.
a hotel restaurant, and I basically spent my formative years washing dishes and making beds and doing all the kinds of things that are normally considered to be female activities. So I say, it's not that hard, guys.
There is a patience piece with that also, though, because many men have said, I'd be happy to help with that, and the female says, but you don't get it done.
Right.
Well,
or you don't do it right.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
Right.
I've heard this.
Yeah.
I've lived this. Oh, boy. Besides this one, is there any one of these 11 that tends to be the thorny issue or challenging? Are they all about equal dependence on the couple?
There are always issues around conflict resolution. And couples having different ways of resolving their conflict. One person, when they're getting into a tussle, needs to step back from it. They need to cool off before they can talk about it rationally and get to the point where they can actually come to a common understanding. And the other one, there's so much anxiety associated, with the conflict that they want to get it done right now. Let's get it resolved right now. So oftentimes it has to do with negotiating. What kind of pace you're going to work at in terms of resolving these things, and how to get on the same page just with regard to protocols for working your way through conflict. Understanding that conflict, of course, is not the sign of a dysfunctional relationship. It's just how you are able to figure out a strategy for working through it.
You ever hear a couple say, not an issue, we don't fight? We know how to handle it.
I have had a couple, on rare occasions, couples say, we've never had a serious fight. I've heard some couples say that.
Think they will later?
Of course they will.
Wow. I always tell them to take that conflict resolution exercise, and I said, you may not need it now, but in 5 years, pull it out of the file because it will be cheaper than going to a therapist at that point.
You know what I'm hearing? I'm thinking, why doesn't every couple do this, regardless of if they're going to live together for 30 years or they're married already and never did this? It sounds so useful.
I think it is.
It is.
And the times that I've actually used the Enrich follow-up inventories, that couples have found that to be very, very helpful as well.
What's that about?
That's basically for couples who, there's one inventory you can take 2 years out from your relationship. So, you've done the prepare, you've been married for 2 years, let's just see how things are going. And then there's another one you can take once the children leave the house and you're empty nesters. And so now how are you going to renegotiate your relationship when the kids aren't a buffer anymore? And then there's another one where really elderly couples, couples that are in their 60s or 70s can take an inventory again.
It would seem to me, I'm being a little difficult here, but it seems to me that any time, if you haven't done this, it would be useful because these issues can always use some work, couldn't they, to go over these things, and particularly conflict resolution, but a lot of things, to get on the same page or to see what... Yeah. What about that? Well, can I sell you the idea of offering this at any time to any couple who wants it? Why not?
Well, it would be nice to have a number of people who were trained and had a certain amount of expertise to do it. From my point of view, I don't have the time. When I started doing this about 200 weddings ago, I cut back the number of weddings I would agree to do from 35 to 10 a year, because this is time consuming. And I spent 3 sessions with a couple doing the prepare, and then I spent 2 further sessions with them working on the ceremony. And then there's additional kinds of conversations that I build into that help couples to understand why exactly is it that I'm getting married. And so I would ask each couple, for instance, to identify what are 3 reasons that you think are central to to your conviction that this is going to be a workable marriage, that this is going to be a sustainable marriage. And so I ask each one of them to think about that independently, and then I actually will sometimes incorporate that into my homily in the wedding ceremony. But I want them to think very, very clearly about what are the 3 strengths, the uppermost strengths that they would identify that give them the faith that this is going to work.
Is that your question or the inventory question?
No, this is a follow-up question that I ask as we're preparing
It's not from the
customized wedding ceremony.
Do you ask a question along that line at all? Why are you getting married?
No, but I do. Mine comes up front. So why did you choose this person? What makes this person important in your life? And what are the best qualities about this person? Why do you love this person?
Oh.
So that's up front. But I want to say one more piece about the inventory, because one of at least what I use is we go through what they consider to be 3 of their strengths in their relationship, and then 3 of their growth areas. And one might say communication is a great strength, but the other one might have it as a weakness or a growth area. And so the conversation, they see it in different ways, and I actually think communication dovetails with the conflict resolution. They go hand in hand, because if communication isn't there, it even compounds the conflict resolution piece.
Well, I know, having counseled couples, as a psychotherapist, it's easy for couples to get to the weaknesses, the struggles, the conflicts. Is it is it easier to get to the strengths than the struggles?
In our conversations, and the guide to the preparing inventory recommends this, you start with the strengths. You give the couple enough confidence then in subsequent conversations to be able to deal with some of the growth areas as they construe it. They don't talk about weaknesses, they talk about growth areas.
I didn't mean the challenges.
I understand the challenges, exactly. I would just say, too, is that the other area that I find that couples really struggle around is financial affairs. Partly because of the family cultures that they come out of. Some families being very, very casual about money, others being more parsimonious and more cautious around money. And so if one party, is always kind of thinking about, how much are we going to save, what got to create a budget every month, and the other couple just kind of is very, very casual in terms of their spending habits, then that can really cause a lot of strain initially, and it's sometimes a little hard to work through those.
But I've heard that the old thing that most marriages' problems revolve around money is really a subterfuge for something else like power or communication. But you're saying, bottom line, it is a problem.
Well, yeah, and as I say, sometimes, well, not just sometimes, oftentimes it has to do with the kind of family in which they were raised.
Yeah.
But you're right, sometimes it has to do with the control issues as well.
Yeah.
And there is a question there that says, who's going to have the main responsibility for managing your money? And couples oftentimes throw up their hands and say, we don't know, which is interesting because that's crucial.
Yeah. In your work, do you find any difference in gay versus straight couples when you do this?
I think there is some difference, but I try to approach it as a relational, not a male-female or a male-male or a female-female. I mean, it's relationship-oriented. And some of these things cross over to just relationships we have with friends, but we try to go to a deeper level with this. But I think I think the one piece that I would add is, what does this relationship present as a challenge to your family or your friends? And I think that's a piece that is heightened because of same-sex. Although it's there in some male-female relationships too, that one family is not in favor of this. But I think it's heightened in same-sex relationships because there's always the challenge of who's comfortable, who's not comfortable, who's not going to come to the wedding. Which I've had. Well, my parents will be there, but just his dad will be there or whatever it is, because that's just too public.
And then you have to work it through so they're both on the same page with how they're feeling. And
right.
Yeah. What about men, gay men versus gay women? Is there any difference there in terms of the issues? Lesbian couple?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I've really thought about. I think the females. I think lesbians might be more just. Well, we're just going to go through this, and we're just going to do it. It's just going to be a wedding, and I think because females think more about weddings. I think as a little girl, you think about your wedding maybe, and maybe males don't. But it's like kind of going into uncharted waters with males.
So they need a little more process?
Yeah, I think they have to think about it a little bit more, and I see more kind of study, especially about the ceremony piece.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I haven't thought about it that much, Dick, but I think I would see that.
I want to get back to, Michael, your thing about why are we getting married. Is there any typical or very frequent answer to that question, or is it different for every couple?
Yeah, the responses I get are quite varied. A lot of times they do focus on their partner's personality traits, the things that are endearing about them. Sometimes it has to do with the kind of values that they share. And oftentimes it just simply is a matter of that, this is a person with, I've never been more comfortable with anybody other than this person. Those are the kinds of things that I hear most frequently, I think. Yeah.
Can I add a question I would ask? See what you think. I'd say, if you lost your romance to this person, is it still someone you'd pick as a best friend? Because you may. Any thoughts about that? Friendship versus marriage?
Well, I have known a lot of men and women who were divorced and had conversations with them about their relationship, if any, with their estranged partner. I did a memorial service for a member of our congregation, 84 years old, just recently, and her ex-husband, subsequently remarried, was at the memorial service, and essentially her children told me that after that initial really feeling of betrayal and their inability to have a relationship, that they became very supportive friends to each other. But it took time.
Yeah.
I think that happens, but I don't think it's typical.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank both of you, Eldonna and Michael, for joining us. This is very interesting, important information, and I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights. And remember, you can find all our podcasts at dickgoldbergradio.com or search for Dick Goldberg at iTunes or YouTube.